our guests, and we'll go to meet the speakers. But welcome to everybody who's here. Today, we're going to chat through how customer success helps power the RevOps Flywheel. So we'll talk about cool customer success stuff, cool RevOps stuff, and then we'll take some questions at the end as well. So we'll go ahead and jump to intros. I'm Connor. I am the CEO of Aptitude 8. We are a HubSpot Diamond partner, soon to be elite, if we can get a couple things working out here in the next couple of days. So we're excited about that. And we're primarily a RevOps consulting firm. So excited to be with these guys. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dan.
Cheers, Connor. So my name's Dan, co-founder of OrgChartHub. Prior to founding OrgChartHub, I used to work for another SaaS business based in the UK and spent 5.5 years with them, mainly head of CS. So I'm going to kind of talk to my experience on that side in regards to CS and RevOps, because I think that's probably most of the good stuff. And then, over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Dan. And guys, I'm Mike. I've been at HubSpot for, almost 11 years now, almost all of it in customer success. I was one of the founding members of our renewals department and helped to build a lot of the systems and operations of that. And that's really where my fascination for RevOps came from, is really working in between like sales and services and with marketing. And so I'm excited to chat today about the role of customer success in RevOps.
Cool. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to Mike first. But for what we're going through today, so we'll talk through role of customer success and RevOps, how they fit into the rest of this as a core go-to-market team, how to work with the rest of your flywheel, what your customer success team should look like, and then we'll go through some details on how you can leverage a lot of RevOps practices to give value to your CS team. So with that, Mike, I will let you kick us off on CS and RevOps and speak to your extensive experience in these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to having the chat here with you guys today. If any questions, come along, feel free to interrupt and we just have a fireside chat, a Zoom side chat. Okay, so to kick things off, I actually want to tell a short story about a hotel called the Magic Castle in Los Angeles. The Magic Castle is one of the highest rated hotels in Los Angeles, rated higher than many premier hotels. However, if you look at pictures online, you'll notice that it looks like a budget motel with like a hot tub sized pool. So how does this 2-story apartment complex from the 50s become one of LA's top rated hotels? You see, the Magic Castle pays attention to creating special moments, or moments that matter. One of those being through something they call the Popsicle Hotline. And the Popsicle Hotline is built with this. They have a cherry red phone mounted to a wall near the pool. When you pick it up, someone will answer with, "Hello, Popsicle Hotline." And you place an order for popsicles. And like moments later, a waiter wearing white gloves delivers you cherry, orange, and grape popsicles on a silver tray, poolside, all complimentary. You see, the Magic Castle has figured out that to delight customers, you don't need to obsess over every detail of their experience. You just need to over-deliver on a few moments that matter most to the customer. And the customers will forget about the small swimming pools or underwhelming decor if they have these very special moments. So you want your company to be like the Magic Castle and to focus on these special moments, these moments that matter. And if you get those right, they can work in concert to give customers a superior experience. From a customer's perspective and software as a service, SaaS businesses, these special moments, they generally occur from the go-to-market teams. That's how they're generated. Marketing creates content that the customer reads as a first impression. Sales having that first contact in a discovery demo call, potentially moving to a closing sequence. And then here's the role of customer success. Customer success steps in with the kickoff onboarding moment to ensure the product works as advertised. The moments that they receive value from the promised impact and their renewal experience. There's actually a lot of critical moments that customer success owns to secure and grow the revenue. To win, you really need to have those sales, marketing, and customer success teams kind of aligned. They can't be working in silos to really execute those special moments. If each team is trying to do it in a silo, then you kind of step on each other's toes and may not actually coordinate those as strongly as you may want. So you need to have a one team culture. Like in onboarding, account management, and renewals, this coordinated approach can really help to customize your customer expectations. To actually execute this, you need people and system processes. But what we find, Connor, if we can go to the next slide there, is that a lot of, sorry, just go one slide before, is that a lot of businesses have these kind of silos of sales, renewals, and success. They don't actually work or communicate through the systems. And what happens then, if you go now to the next one, is that we create these workarounds because the systems don't talk to each other, and that ends up creating friction between these teams. So what you really want to have is this people collaboration and system collaboration, and in between there you have data sharing. That's marketing is sharing that, hey, this customer has consumed these ebooks or watched these videos, they're most interested in this, and the sales is talking to the customer success team, and they're all kind of talking together. You have that data sharing and process collaboration. If you can get that right, then what that looks like is the customer experience, revenue impact, employee experience, and revenue reporting. Well, these are kind of the main things that a customer success RevOps function really starts to pay attention to. That's how we fit into this picture of aligning the systems and processes. So then if you look at those responsibilities, we're responsible for coordinating a one team kind of approach to having a great customer experience. We're focused on revenue retention and revenue growth. We have to have a great employee experience. We ultimately are going to be interacting with the customers. We need to make sure that our tools are set up for success. And then finally, revenue reporting. But this all looks different depending on what your main goals are for your customer success team. I find that generally in different stages of your company's growth, you may have different focuses of the customer success team, whether it be on with your company's goals, maybe on acquiring more customers. Well, then your customer success team will work very closely with sales and marketing, and product plays a role there. When you're more focused on just retaining, customer success and support are going to work together to find those product bugs and surface those up to the other teams. And when you're expanding revenue, which is where I think that all companies should really be focused on, is your success team plays a big role in working with your customers to identify that growth and work with the sales team to help spread it out. So that's kind of a high level kind of introduction there to what I see as kind of the role of customer success and RevOps. What maybe we'll do now is pass it over to Dan to talk about defining your customer success team.
Mike, does HubSpot have a popsicle phone?
I think we're working on it. It's one of those ideas that's brewing in the HubSpot labs.
I had not heard that story, Mike, and I think to give you credence to it, we had stayed, I think in like the Langham in Chicago, and I remember, it was funny as you referenced, this is the number one thing that I remember, and this is like a nice hotel, we were like leaving the city, is they had a phone in the hallway, and when I picked it up, someone just said, "Yes, hello, what can we do for you?" Like, it didn't ring, I didn't click any buttons. I was like, this is amazing, like this is wild. And that totally resonated with me, and no one even brought me popsicles on the other. That sounds like an enhancement.
Yeah, I think that's like the main point that I wanted to make here is, those when customer success RevOps, you want to identify what are those special moments for your business and for your companies, and identify what those are. What can you do, and then help enable it. Like renewal is obviously a big moment in a customer's life cycle. So that's whatever the first thing that happens with that renewal, that's a moment that matters. It could be the first, like if you're sending like notification emails to say, hey, your renewal is coming up. Well, that's the first moment that they have. So how are you customizing that? What sort of experience are you generating for your customer? And that's really where I see the role of CS and RevOps, is enabling these moments that matter.
Makes sense. Cool. I'll jump onto my section. So as Mike said on the slide before, the relationship between CS and revenue depends. Now, I hate it when people say it depends. It's very annoying, but CS structures and goals are different for every single team. And it really is down to who are you selling to, what's your product type. And this changed for us at my previous company over and over and over again. And so I'm going to talk to our experience in terms of how it chopped and changed, and how it developed and some of the stuff that happened during that period. And hopefully you can take away some insights from this story. So as I mentioned, I started at a company called Accrue. It was the very early days of Accrue, which is the SaaS business I joined. We were just on 150K ARR. I was their first sales hire. And we made our way towards the 10 million mark. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get there. We got acquired before that moment happened. So I didn't have the experience beyond that like Mike did. But there's a lot that went on during that period of time. And we probably tried every single combination of CS structure you can think of. And so I'll jump into the learnings just now. The hard part about this is if you Google, how should I structure my CS team? We didn't get an answer in 2014 or 2015, and you won't get an answer today. And that's really annoying. But as I said, let me talk to a couple of the insights. If you could move on to the next slide for me, Connor. So where we were at back in 2014, 2015 is we had a business where we were selling to small B2B businesses, and we had a freemium plan. That was all going very smoothly at the time. And we had 2 people in CS. They were fully focused on the maintain side. So they were focusing on the adoption, and they had a lot of product goals. The challenges came when we started, fortunately for us, started to get a lot of attention on the enterprise side. So we had attention from like people like PayPal and IBM who wanted to start to use our product. This changed everything. It changed the way our product had to work. It changed the way that we thought about CS. So what happened then is, because I was one of the first salespeople, the CEO came to me and said, do you mind kind of going into a CS role, kind of a head of account management, looking after CS for a while? That while turned into about 3.5 years. And what happened was we went from the CS team being responsible for the maintain to maintain, retention, and we took on expansion as well. The expansion piece was interesting. Like, if you hear people talk about whether CS should be responsible for expansion, it's kind of like Marmite. You either love it or hate it, you agree with it or you disagree with it. I'm kind of in between. I'm all right with it, and I'll explain why in a second. So where we were at in our product cycle, and this is hopefully going to be relevant for those of you in the early stages, the product was evolving and our customer base was evolving. And the old customer, unfortunately for us, was starting to churn, and kind of like rightly so, because we were going further and further up market. And our main focus was enterprise. It was becoming enterprise. What that meant is our retention, logo retention, was horrific. It was like 65%. It was awful. So our CS focus had to be on a combination of expansion and retention. Expansion on the biggest customers, ensuring they're successful firstly, but then because they're enterprise businesses, often you land in, for us, it was like Europe, in their European office, and then we're expanding across the world and in North America and APAC. So we did, in the end, we started to do a really good job on the expansion piece. So we had a net revenue retention of 130%, but our retention was sloppy, and it was sloppy, but it was okay. But that was kind of a learning that I'd not heard anybody talk about, that you can have very poor logo retention but have good net revenue retention. And we raised money off the back of that, so people were agreeing with us that it was okay. It wasn't okay after another year or year and a half, when we were still finding out the situation. So I take responsibility for this. I think we focused too much on the expansion side, not enough on the retention side. As we were thinking about that, we got acquired by integrate.com. They had a different structure anyway. They were CS team was retention and maintenance focused, and the sales team were expansion focused only, like hunters and farmers. So they had teams that just focused on expansion and teams that just focused on the new business. So we went the full gamut, backwards and forwards. And I think the biggest kind of lesson, or one of the biggest takeaways I took away from that journey, was you really need to focus on who your customer is today, but who is your customer going to be in the next year or 2 years. And certainly within OrgChartHub today, that's what we think about. Like, we solely built OrgChartHub for HubSpot. HubSpot's customer base today is probably going to change over the next 2 to 3 years as HubSpot features fill out, they go further up market. So we need to think about that now and how we might change our CS team and how that relates to revenue. Yeah, over to you, Connor.
Cool. So I think on my end, what I'm going to talk about is sort of like how you equip in your tech stack and using some of the tools that you have your team with the details to actually go after this. So I think one of the first pieces, and I think in aggregate, right, is like customers are a lot more complicated than prospects. You probably invest in data enrichment tools, and you maybe have some web tracking or other elements for your sales teams to sort of know what people are interested in, what's going on. But the number of signals and the amount of data you have about people before they're a customer is just significantly less, right? So like if someone's an active customer, they have accounts, they have subscriptions, they have usage data, they're doing things in your product, they're talking to people at your company. And in order to get your customer facing CS teams best equipped to manage those customers, you have to give them a lot of that data. And I think this is actually where HubSpot, I think, really excels as a solution as well. So behavioral events, there's a legacy version, there's a new version, which is very cool. We recommend a lot of folks look into it. And so things that you can do with this, right? So adding in product data to your contact record. So you can send in when people last logged in, when was the last time that they interacted with key features or did specific actions. One of the things that we do with a lot of customers is go through their product interaction and say, what are the key events that people interact with? And the reality is, if you have a developed product org, your product team probably already knows what these are, and you can typically just tag along to whatever they're using to manage some of the product analytics as well. And if you can surface that data to your CS teams, not only can they use it on an individual level, but they can build lists around these behavior. They can go pull a list using all of your CRM data that says, who are my highest value accounts that I manage? Who are my highest value accounts that haven't logged in the last 30 days or haven't taken a key action or haven't added users in a really long time? And you can start to build those segments out, and that allows them to figure out who should I be talking to, instead of just sort of going through their list of active customers and sort of running campaigns against them. Instead, they're really focusing on the people that are the most important. Additionally, you can start leveraging some of the marketing side functionality, right? So lead scoring is one example, but you can extend some of your scoring models into CS side actions. So who are the customers that have the most engagement? Which are the ones that are the healthiest? And how can I use those to prioritize my actions? And ultimately, this should aggregate up to, how do you move to proactive customer success that's based on engagement instead of just reactive, right? You don't want your CS people to be firefighters that only manage accounts when someone's frustrated or upset or sort of has a signal. You want them to be able to get ahead of that interaction and not wait until they give you a bad CSAT score, or reach out and say, hey, we're thinking about canceling. And now they spend all of their time managing churn requests instead of building and helping customers and helping them get value out of your product and out of your service and solution. And I think these are just some super tactical ways you can do that. And another one that I really like, if we jump ahead to the next slide, is something that came. There we go. Something that I think it's kind of old news at this point, but it's still one of my favorite things, is the custom object side, which is tailor HubSpot's data model to your business, and store things like invoices and subscriptions and plans. And we have folks who are managing, we're working with a customer that does brick manufacturing. And one of the big problems with our sales reps is, hey, we have people that order bricks and then we ship them bricks, but the sales rep then needs to find out did all the bricks arrive? Are any of them damaged? Do you need a replacement order? And then being able to store that shipment data in HubSpot allows them to queue up those sort of CS side actions of, hey, did everything arrive okay? Do you need help with anything? Instead of waiting for someone to come in and be like, hey, our shipment arrived. Sorry, we didn't look at it for a week, but a bunch of these are broken and now it's sort of chewing up the rest of the supply chain. Similar to your order history, find out what are the elements that are critical to your post-sale success. What are the things your CS team needs to deliver a really excellent experience? And how can you equip them with that data and push a lot of this in? And the beauty of sort of custom objects in the HubSpot world is you're no longer limited to what data already exists in the platform. You can really be pushing in information about anything else that would be valuable to your teams. And this will equip them so much better to handle a lot of these pieces so that they have that at their fingertips. In terms of sort of like how to go about this, right? So those are some super tactical ways. If we jump ahead to the next slide, in terms of getting started. So if you identify kind of initially, what are the goals? What are you trying to measure your CS team about? I think Daniel and Michael talked about this a lot. Is it exclusively on renewals? Is it upsell? Is it expansion? Like, what are the things that you care about them doing? And if you can define how CS fits into the overall organization, you should be able to manage that. And then the next thing we always recommend across all sort of RevOps functions is audit your existing process. Go look at what your CS team does. I think CS is one of my favorite groups that we do audits around, because you always find out, oh yeah, in order to do this, I reference this other spreadsheet, I go to this billing system, I go log into the product and look at their usage history, and like everything ends up informing what's going on across stuff. And you're like, oh my God, these guys spend so much time leveraging other tools and just trying to figure out where they should be focused. And so audit your whole process, find out what other tools and systems that they're using and accessing, and then ultimately start figuring out how you can implement change. Ideally, move from one side of the workflow to the other. Change management's hard. If you have a small, nimble team, you can probably do this really, really quickly. If you're on the larger side, it'll take a little bit more planning and change management, but start to sort of implement a lot of those out and assign those product owners. And the biggest thing I think that's important, and this applies to all go-to-market teams, but I think especially on CS, is people who are divorced from it. So even just hearing Michael and Dan talk about this, there's so many of these things that I don't think about on the technical RevOps side that are so applicable, and bring someone in who can be a product owner from those teams and can be the person who says, I know what this needs to look like. I will beta it for you, and don't solve problems that people don't really feel like they have. Jumping ahead to the next one here. This is lightweight, but this is just an example of really map out that process, understand how all of this works, see what they do, and you could probably start to automate a bunch of different components of this. And so whether you're doing integrated tools, whether you're leveraging sort of things like Operations Hub and doing coded actions, or you're leveraging standard HubSpot automation technology, however you end up solving these problems, really get a firm idea of what are all the manual steps, what are the other systems people log into. We really like to create kind of a current state of how are things done today, and then a future state of how would these work if we eliminated all of the friction for our customer facing teams, and how could they be more effective and efficient, and really map a lot of this out. And then you should be able to start to implement a lot of those changes. So with that, I'll transition over to questions. And if anyone has anything that you guys would like to ask or get input on, please let us know. Or also to Michael and Dan, if you guys have comments, I wanted to interject on a couple of things that you guys said that I thought were awesome.
I've got a question for Mike, if that's all right, because hopefully it'll be interesting for everyone. Mike, you've been at HubSpot for like a long time. 11 years is a good stint at HubSpot. How has the relationship in terms of revenue and CS changed over those 11 years? I would have thought there'd be some interesting nuggets during that period.
Yeah, so I guess when you mean like the focus on revenue retention versus revenue expansion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely ebbed and flowed. We can see some, we've had different periods. And when I first joined HubSpot, it was really focused more on just a straight retention, where we had account managers who would try to do some identification of growth, but it was more just, let's just make sure we have happy customers. And what Connor was talking about earlier with having those mapping out what like product usage your customers have and if they're logging in, and what we would call the health score criteria was really important to be able to get a good view of your customer base and start to move to a more proactive instead of reactive model. Over time, that shifted even more into revenue retention plays, where we actually started a sales team that was purely inside sales. And they would message the customer base and try to drum up more business, where the customer success team was only measured on logo retention. And there are some good things and bad things about it. Like that, I think it worked from a financial perspective. There was also a lot of stepping on toes, where just the teams weren't super coordinated all the time, and a customer may have called into the support or had a call with their account manager and complaining about a feature or something that's not working, and then just a couple of days later, get a phone call from a sales rep, trying to sell them something. Now we're more balanced. Now I think we're much more nuanced in our approach, and with Yamini is our HubSpot hired a chief customer officer a couple of years ago, named Yamini, who's really has RevOps at the central theme of our kind of 3-year transition, and aligning our teams, so where marketing, sales, and customer success are working in much greater tandem. And that allows us to really focus on net revenue retention as the main driver. We still have a secondary metric of logo retention, so it's not something we don't look at, but it's net revenue retention of, like, if a customer is not seeing success, let's not like downgrade them to the lowest package possible because I hit my logo retention numbers. You actually want to like dig in, find out what's not working with them. Is there opportunity to fix what's not working? Is there other parts of your platform that can help solve that? Really get to the root of problems, and not have an easy way out of just downgrading. So yeah, it's evolved over time is the short answer to it, Dan.
Yeah. A follow-up on that for either of you. It's just really interesting to me, less on the sort of like what's the KPI management, or sort of how we want to look at it. I'm usually on the downstream of that, of like, hey, we need to measure this. How do we build it? On your guys' end, in terms of the difference between those, both of you sort of touched on that. Can you guys expand on like how to think about the difference between those two and how they can be sort of like conversely related, where you can sort of have a higher net retention even if you're sort of decreasing the logo retention? Or just like expand on that for somebody who may be a little more divorced from the details of those CS KPIs.
Yeah, I can kind of like touch on why we had that situation. So kind of what I was trying to explain was we were okay with the very kind of the poor logo retention for a period of time because the product was changing and the customer base was changing. I think that's relatively acceptable if you're kind of like making that pivot to a different customer base. Where it became unacceptable is we continue to kind of have a relatively poor number, and the product had changed, and the CS team had changed, so we need to look at that in more detail. But it's a tricky one because it's just a constant balance, and there's no like, you always have some like goals on the number that you want to hit, and you hear about these goals and Jason Lemkin talking about them and other famous SaaS people talking about them, but that's what I meant. But it's tricky for what product stage you are at. And I think you just need to kind of like think about that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, Dan. It even changes with the type of customers that you're working with. I can imagine with your previous company, if you have if you're losing most of your customers, but your net revenue retention is growing, that just means that you're having like a frothy amount of a few customers who are adding to your business, and that's really risky in some business models, where now if one of those customers leaves, well, now you're not doing so great. As you look at like small business, mid-market, and enterprises, types of customers and the way you approach those customers. I have a different approach to working with enterprise customers where, yes, net revenue is still the goal. Like I still want to expand, but I have much more emphasis on logo retention in those high dollar, high value accounts. Then as opposed to very small business or small business accounts where typically they're getting like one product to start and they're solving one pain point solution and they're growing their business. And as they grow their business, they have other problems that come and your product can help to solve those. So you're focused more on expansion. So yeah, it can change depending on even who your target audience is.
Audience questions from anybody? Otherwise, I'll just keep picking your brains. Do you guys think that there is, I think so one of the things that you talked about, Dan, is like early in your product life cycle that you have customers that are maybe not a good fit for where your sort of product is evolving and changing, or some of those other pieces of like, do you guys think that there's any situation where there is either proactive or productive or churn that's, you know, less of a concern or something that you sort of are proactively removing customers from that book or sort of managing them out versus continuously looking at that renewal?
Yeah, I mean, we in a career last SaaS company, we definitely had that situation, and it's and I was one of the people having those tricky conversations with the customers where we were no longer a good fit for them. There was not huge amounts, but there was a group where it was not good, and you just have to be open with them and just say, look, this is the direction that the product and the business is going in. We were right for you, we're not going to be right for you going forward. And some of those customers stuck around knowing that, because they were just hanging on because it was still working okay for them, and then eventually as the product developed even further in the wrong direction, they would go. I think the really tricky part is you can spend too long thinking it's acceptable that you have those people disappear, and you need to flip at some point. You need to flip that and change and go, no, it's no longer acceptable. We've got rid of, or we're no longer working with those types of customers. And the faster you kind of get to that point, really, the better.
I think it's a really good call out that if you embrace that mindset, it can very quickly become like, oh yeah, you know, they're just not a good fit. And then all of a sudden you're just sort of like making excuses for people churning out, which is not a good look.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Again, it comes to the balance, right? If you need to make a decision, do you want to build that for your customers? Like, is that the market that you're trying to solve? Is that the pains you're trying to solve? And if not, then I think, Dan, you did the exact right thing. Just be upfront, transparent, and say, hey, here's the direction that we're going.
Connor, I'd love to. So something we think about at OrgChartHub, because obviously we're huge users of HubSpot ourselves, we do put product data into HubSpot and do lots of things related to that. But I'd love to hear what other customers are doing with that, like some of the best examples.
For sure. Those are my favorite problems to solve. What's interesting is I think that the let's put product data in the CRM 12, 18 months ago was like, oh yeah, like that's really interesting. Like we should think about doing that. And now it like we're having new customers come in that are like, we need a CRM, we need a marketing solution. Number one thing that's most important to us is like, we need the product data in there. Like, let's talk about how we do that. And I think, I don't think it's quite table stakes yet, but I do think that, I think that's coming and it should be something that you're thinking about and caring about. So what we typically see are, so one of the first pieces is like account creation. If you're a free trial driven business, we see this a lot where you use the Forms API, push in contact creation, make sure you know who are my current people that are on trials, know how long your trials last, and then being able to see where those trials are at. And that's a little bit more up in the funnel, but in terms of sort of that product integration for that starting point, and being able to sort of see then what are the key actions that you care about, sort of like in your trial experience, but then do the same exercise. So we see people do this because sometimes you'll have sort of a growth marketer or somebody on the product team that's really focused on like free trial activation, but that mindset ends up disappearing on the CS side. And so I think the first piece is like, what are the key actions that are important? And you can, and I'm not the person to speak to exactly how to do this, but you can analyze this data, you can assess it, you can see, what are the things that our customers do that most historically leads to them driving value from the platform, most historically leads to them like actually renewing and staying in. It depends on how big your data set is and your product analytics and all those other pieces, but really have a good handle on what are the actions that we care about, and then find out how you can get them into your CRM solution. And I think additionally to that, we also see people send both behavioral data. So that would be every time someone logs in, every time someone maybe in your case, right, it could be like they created a new org chart, they added people to an org chart. Like those would be individual events, and then also field level information. So how many org charts do they have? How many people is on their average org chart? Those are like field level pieces. And honestly, I think a lot of people think about integration problems as they need really complex bi-directional syncing between all of these applications. You really don't to get value. Like really all you need is, do they have an account? What are they paying for it? What tier are they on? What are the critical actions that they've taken? And when was the last time they did those things? And with that data, you can create super proactive CS campaigns and surface automated touches and human touches against people based off of their engagement. We've seen customers that just by introducing sort of more of like a renewal like life cycle type funnel. So think about it as here's someone who has really low engagement. They haven't really been involved in the platform. Let's start sending them on an automated journey and trying to get them to kind of come back and use the tool before their next renewal. And they sort of have people that's working really well against. And then for people it's not working well against, they're injecting sort of manual human-driven CS touches. And all of a sudden, instead of your CSM saying, yeah, I have all these accounts, I've only gotten to this many, I'm calling them, they're really saying like, here are the people who are totally fine, here are the people I'm engaging with, and here's our action plan against each one of them. And ultimately to do that, like really you just need a last login date, and then like when was the last time they did some critical action that you care about, and you can power all of that automation off of that and add granularity as you go.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. No, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say that last login date is it's underutilized, isn't it? It's like such a powerful number or date.
Yeah, all you need is last. You're like, oh wow, this person logged in like 6 months, and we should go find out what's going on.
Yeah, that's
software is not. Yeah, the phrase I use a lot is like software is not a gym membership, right? Like if people sign up and they pay for a year and they turn, it's horrible. Like it's not a good outcome at all. We don't want them to just be paying us and never use the tool. They need to be driving value out of it, or else it doesn't work. There's a question from Suzanne. I haven't read it, so I'll read it to you guys, and then I'm hoping that one of you jumps on this, which is how does customer success and product teams collaborate most effectively when product data is now in the CRM? So for us, activation and successful product configuration is being owned much more by customer success than product. I'm happy to give a perspective there, but I imagine that both Dan and Mike have dealt with this really directly as well.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So the way I would see it then is like products would be kind of owning the facilitation of getting that data into the CRM, and helping making it consumable by the customer success team. And now the customer success team can leverage that data that the product team is now giving them to help build almost exactly what you're talking about there, Connor, nudges or internal alerts, scoring systems, health scoring systems, to be able to be proactive and reactive talking to their customers. But it needs to be, it is more of a partnership to where when you have that data that you're getting from the product team, the first like weeks and months that you get it, you're going to learn stuff, and you're going to learn, well, actually this data is great, but I need it like a different version of that, or I maybe need this data point instead of that data point. So it will evolve and grow. And if you need to have a commitment from the product team to, not be reaching out to the customers or engaging with the customers, but to have that partnership to say, I want to help give you the data to help make your role in facilitating great customer experiences through customer success to the most effective as possible.
Yeah, I think to extend on that as well, is I think that product is going to end up owning what gets tracked, and is it accessible? And what we typically find is sort of adding in a new thing that's ever been tracked before is hard, right? It's a high lift to do that. So I always start with, hey, product, what do you have already? What's a field? What are events that you track? Do you send those somewhere else? Like, are you using some sort of like, whether it's a mix panel or an Amplitude or a GA or whatever you're using to kind of manage product behavior? Are you using one of those now? And if so, what events are you sending to those solutions? And then I sort of have CS and go back to them and be like, hey, what of these do you care about? Because I'm sure that there's tons in there that they're like, none of this means anything to me. Like, it just doesn't matter to me. It matters to a UX designer. And then the CS team should be able to tell you, here are the things that we care about, that we would really like to manage. And I think we typically see that relationship brokered by someone on the RevOps side, and someone really saying, okay, hey, what do you care about? What do you have? How do we get those things connected, and sort of designing that integration piece of it? But regardless of who sort of like owns that part of the experience, I think the important piece is they probably have a lot of this data already. And if they don't, CS can have a really meaningful interaction, especially at an earlier stage of an organization, of defining what should we care about tracking that we don't track. And your CS team can probably tell you, I would love to know if my customers have done X. And then that really informs product of, here are the key things we should be managing. And the way that we usually think about it is manage the individual event, manage the incrementing number. So how many of them have there been, and then the last date. And if you have those three numbers, you can build really, really sophisticated rules and automations and segments out of all of that as well.
And keep it simple. I think that's what you're saying there, Connor. I think that's one of the most important messages from this. So Suzanne, I think you said you might have missed the beginning of the presentation. I was talking about these moments that matter and creating special events for your customers. So like really boiling it down to what data do you actually need to help create those experiences? Like, do you really need to know that they have like open your ebook 45 times? Like, just really think about what are those critical things. And what I would, if you haven't done so already, like I find a helpful exercise is to create kind of a health scorecard of for customers that you can do a kind of grading metric against. And that could be like last logins, obviously a really good one. Combinations of apps, like if they're using this app and this app, they're more successful together. Transactions, NPS data, if you have it, maybe there's some financial data, but start to build out like a health check sort of model and manually grade your customers against it and see, does it work? And then you can be better informed when you need to make requests from the product team.
Yeah, I think to tack onto that too, to your point, and this applies to all integrations, but I think also on the product side too. People always start with, I need really tight, real time, bi-directional, all the fields, all the data. And it's like, start with really what adds value. And that doesn't mean that, having all the data is useless, but it starts to be noise. And you really want to focus on what are the key signals that really can drive outcomes, and really focus on how can we measure and manage those. And I think to your point, you don't need to build the whole integration to figure that out. It's really a strategy exercise between what are those customer segments, what is the user behavior, and let's sort of combine all of those together and come out the other side with, here are the 3 or 4 things we maybe care about, and everything else is noise.
I'll tell you a quick story about how HubSpot evolved this. When we started the renewals team 6 or 7 years ago, one of the first functions that we built was this health score. And for a year and a half, we had the renewal managers manually filling out a health score for every customer coming up for renewal. And so we would have to go like look at for us, I think I forget what we were using, something like Mixpanel or something like that. We would go and look at those numbers. We would then go back into our scorecard system. We would fill that out. We would go read like what the customers' support comments were. It would take about an hour and a half. It was a heavy investment into getting to to get to know the health of a customer. And we do that 6 months before renewal and 3 months before renewal. And we built up that data for almost, like I said, a year and a half before we hired a data scientist to come in and start to automate a lot of that. And now today it is all automated and we can have the health of the customer at our fingertips anytime, but we spend a heavy investment making sure we got that right before we started to make a heavy investment into building it out.
I think to echo that, this is what was the HubSpot head count when you guys were doing this at that time, or number of you, any meaningful metric on size, whether it's people or customers?
Let's see, with people, we were probably like 800 employees, 800 employees.
And I think the important part here is like, you don't need to solve for the perfect situation to really add and include meaningful value. And I think that's a really valuable anecdote, because I think that one of the things that we always are working with smaller organizations on is this desire to really over engineer and overcomplicate, do a lot of these things. And it's like, listen, man, like if you have 800 people and you have all of these customers and you're doing all of this and you can build out house scores that solve for some of this, like that's a good first step. And really make sure you understand that strategy and what you care about before you're building out all of the complex integration components, or else you're gonna have to tear it all down later anyway.
Yeah, something my director likes to say a lot, if you automate a broken process, well, you still have a broken process. So go back to the roots of what you're looking for. Yeah, and you had mentioned there earlier, Connor, RevOps typically is kind of in between product and customer success. And if you have a RevOps function, that's super. And like you that helps to bring that alignment there and to work between the two orgs. And if you don't have it, that's okay too. But start to build those relationships yourself.
Take one more, else we'll wrap. If anyone has anything else that you want to ask. I'll start thanking you guys regardless, which is, this is awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Connor, I actually had a question for you.
Sure.
Like, you've been doing these integrations for customers with inside of HubSpot, and I find it super exciting to have custom objects and being able to do this like really cool stuff with inside of HubSpot. What are kind of like the top pains that your customers are seeing and that you're helping to solve now?
Oof, that is a doozy of a question. I would say let's see, top. How many did you give me? Did you say top pains? I didn't get it. I didn't get a
top pains. Yeah, no numbers. Very cool. Open.
So I would say like some of the big ones that we always see is it all comes down really to alignment between different functions, right? And where that critical function breaks off. So we see between sales and marketing, it's attribution. It's marketing's doing all these things and sales is doing these things. If we don't know which one is driving value, and we're trying to figure that out so we can make sort of go-to-market investments, is a pretty constant theme. I'd say I'll sort of use the term like product blindness. But one of the reasons that I talk a lot about the integration components from other parts of the process, and product here is specific to like if you're a SaaS company and you have some of those pieces figured out. But even if you're not a SaaS company, right? If you're doing shipping or you have some service delivery or wherever the post-sale experience is driven, I think that something we see all the time is the CS and the sales teams, the people that are interacting with customers, just don't have data about who that customer is or what that customer is doing, especially after the sale. And we see it on the service delivery side of like, how many hours in the retainer has this person used? Is their project almost done? Like, is their project over budget? Like, I don't know. And similarly, right? You see it on software is like, hey, I'm telling this customer, like, hey, are you planning on renewing? What's going on? And this customer is like, yeah, dude, like we're doing tons of stuff in the product right now. Don't like now I'm like, are you going to turn us off? Like, are you going to upgrade us? Do we need to be worried about that? Should we be reevaluating this whole position? And I think just generally having information around the rest of the pieces of what that looks like. And so I think that adds a lot of value as well. And then I'd put sort of the other elements that we run into are having generally like data sync integration woes across different tools as well. I give a big shout out to, if you guys have not seen the new HubSpot commercial. What is HubSpot? When I check it out, I think it speaks really heavily to this, which is people just being like, hey, I'm seeing this in this system and you're seeing that in that system, and no one knows what the right answer is. And we see that being a common challenge that we run into as well, which comes down to it's sync, it's process, it's some data doesn't get to some places and it gets to others. And that's sort of a pretty consistent theme regardless of which team we end up working with. So we do a lot of audits, we do a lot of process enhancements, we do a lot of integration and technical execution work, but I think it really comes back to like the strategy of defining and I really like that if you automate a broken process, you still have a broken process, which is we have a lot of like, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And you find out like we built layer on top of layer on top of layer. And like the root cause issue is just that like no one knows if this customer has an active plan. So we've created all this stuff going on. You're like, if we knew that, would we need to do any of this? Like, oh no, that'd be great. And you sort of want to question that premise of like, is this even the problem that we have?
Love that.
Cool. Any closing things before I cut you both off and say we're done?
I just like to thank you guys for inviting me here. I always love to talk about customer success and RevOps. I find it such a fascinating topic because, like as you mentioned, Connor, like when you start to dive into a customer success team and what are they doing today and like how are they managing this, it's all over the place. It's all over the spectrum of how people are solving this because it's such a necessity to have, but there's no like blueprint to say like if you're going like sales has lots of blueprints, you can look them up, there's tons of them, you can pick a method and go for it, and customer success is still totally evolving. And it's a lot of fun to be in this space and have your hands in creating these solutions for your company and for your customers and in your career. And as you start to grow your skills and start to go off and to help maybe build your own company or go work for other companies, like we're building this customer success RevOps function now. And so thanks for having me here and chatting about it. And I hope that we can do this again and continue the conversation because I don't think it stops here.
No, and I'd just echo that as well. Like a CS role is different from company to company to company. And like Mike said, if you're doing sales, it's pretty similar. Like it's win a new customer, move on, win a new customer, move on. Whereas CS, there's so many different responsibilities we didn't even touch on, health scoring being one of them. So yeah, always happy to debate and and chat through all the things that CS are involved with.
For sure. We should do a debate on if CS should be, what should CS be focused on? Renewals, expansion, like what is that metric? Would be a fun conversation as well. Well, thank you guys both so much for coming and sharing your insights, both as heavy practitioners and experts at a whole bunch of different stages of organization is really awesome. So really appreciate you guys coming on. Thanks everybody for attending. We'll send out the recording as well for anybody who wasn't able to make it or to anybody who joined a little later than the start time as well. But thank you guys all so much, and we will do more of these in the future.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.